we're talking about the child makeover. Now, we've been talking about the whole home makeover, and last time we discussed the parent makeover. In that time, we discussed how important it is for loving the Lord your God and the commandments of God to first of all be on our hearts before we then impress them upon our children. But now we're going to talk about the child makeover. Now, Mark, in the midst of all of this busyness, we might have hockey practice, we might have soccer, you might have football, music lessons, schooling. I mean, the list goes on and on. And we're trying to raise these children so they'll be, well-functioning adults someday. But how important, or, where does faith at home or faith development fit into all of this, and how important is it?
Yeah, and that's obviously our starting point has been, what do you want most for your kids, right? We all want them. And we start, when you hold a child for the first time, when you have them, you start thinking of things like, oh, I want my kid to succeed in life. I want them to have a good education. I want to provide for them so that they can have a good career wherever God calls them to go. And we start, thinking, planning, setting aside money for all those types of things, right? So that our kids will turn out well or have all the best opportunities in life. And so, but then this whole faith thing, we sit there and go, okay, of all the things I could want, there is only one thing that would lead our kids through what is the hardest thing that we fear for all of our kids, which is this thing called death. We don't want our kids to die. And it just scares us to think, and we're trying to protect them from that and everything that we can. And yet it can come at any time. And we just had a 16-year-old in our area. I mean, actually 5 kids in a car that they're still waiting to find out, but probably just swerved for a deer, something like that. 4 of them had their seatbelts on, but the gal in the middle in the back wasn't able to find the seatbelt or whatever. And sure enough, she was the one that ended up being killed in this accident. And it's obviously just devastated our community, the families in this community. You sit there and go, and it just, every time you hear stories like that, as a parent, it just sends shivers up your back. Like, we don't want that. And yet the beauty of this situation is this family and this girl was super involved in their church. The parents were incredible, faithful followers of the Lord. So they're mourning, but they do not mourn as people who have no hope, because they knew she had a faith, and so they know that death is not the end. And so you sit there and go, as hard as it is, and they've been shorted on time here on this earth, they're still going to have all eternity together. And so it's just one of those, what more could we want for our kids than to have faith, right? And so everything that we're about is trying to, how do we help our kids to have a real faith in Christ so that death will never be the end for them. And so, but now there is a reality too that comes with faith, though, that it impacts. So obviously the ultimate reason why is that, right? I mean, do you really need another reason other than that?
Mm-hmm.
But faith also does, statistically we've seen that faith also impacts when kids have a strong faith in Christ. It does come out in other behaviors and in other decisions and things that they make. I remember when I was a youth and family pastor, I had just kind of been into it for a few years. And so I was still wet behind the ears trying to learn. And there was this guy by the name of Mert Strumman who had founded called the Youth and Family Institute. And he was a researcher. And he kind of told the story or the story was told about him, that he was probably a guy that was just sitting at a grocery store line, and he saw, a parent with a kid over here and a parent with a kid over here. And this kid was misbehaving and causing all sorts of problems and screaming and hollering and trying to grab candy. And the parent, it was just a big, ugly mess. Whereas this parent and their kid was not doing anything and just being calm and behaving well, and everything was good. And it's like he sat back and was like, why do some kids turn out this way and act this way? And why do other kids turn out like this? Or almost like, why do some kids get into drugs and some don't? Why do some kids get into drinking alcohol and some do not? Why do some get good grades and some get bad grades? And I mean, he was just a guy that was wondering questions like that. Why do some kids for lack of a better way, why do some kids turn out good or and avoid at-risk behaviors, and why do others get involved in at-risk behaviors? And he was a researcher, so he started doing research on kids, and not just a few kids, not just, I mean, we're talking hundreds. It's turned into thousands of kids. And he became the founder of a organization called Search Institute. And this Search Institute continued that work. And what they discovered were what they call developmental assets. Started with 30, it then evolved to 40 assets that if you go out to Search Institute, their website, you'll find what the 40 developmental assets are. But like, these are things that a kid may or may not have, assets that they may have in their life or may not have in their life. And so these are important things. And here's the power of these assets, is that the more assets a child has in their life. So literally teenagers at schools, it's a secular organization that will survey teenagers in schools and then, take them through. And when the results come back, you can literally take a look and say, my kid has 12 of the 40 assets based on their answers. They have 18 of the 40, they have 25 of the 40, whatever it may be of these assets. And then you can see which ones they have and which ones they don't. And the reason this is so important is because the more assets a child has in their life, the less likely they are to get involved in the at-risk behaviors that I'm going to show you right now. So let me show you the power of these 40 assets.
Let me just pause you there for a second, Mark, just to underline how important and how significant this research is in these 40 developmental assets. Now, this came out from a Christian guy that came up with these 40 developmental assets. And, if you're looking at your community today and look at the community-driven, especially youth programs that are available in your community, chances are that they will actually use these 40 developmental assets and to give them direction behind what they're doing and that sort of thing, because they want to provide these assets to kids so that they can do better in school and decrease in at-risk behavior, less crime and violence and that sort of thing. So it's been very broadly used and very impacting. But Mark, now there's a side to this that you picked up on that's pretty cool. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, well, let me first just showcase the power of these assets just briefly so that you can see the impact. So like, for example, alcohol use. I mean, do we want our teenagers using alcohol? Do we not? Well, for those that have, they talk about, do you have 25 or more of the 40 assets? If you're in a situation, if you have a certain number, well, you see the difference. The difference is this: 47% of kids that have, and you probably have the data in front of you, Brian, and you sit there and go, oh my goodness, if they just have 0 to 10 of the assets, 47% of those kids are using alcohol on some sort of a regular basis, usually at least once a week, and having 3 or more drinks per occasion. So you sit there and go, but if they have 31 or more of the assets, so these are the two ends of the spectrum, right? So if you have 0 to 10, they don't have very many assets in their life, there's a high likelihood that those kids are going to be drinking as teenagers. But if they have 31 or more of the assets, it drops down to 4% of those kids. So you sit there and go, whoa. And then when it goes to drug use, a kid only has 0 to 10 of the assets in their life, 25% of those are admittedly using drugs. Whereas if a kid has more than 31, a teenager has more than 31 of the assets, it drops down to around 1% of those kids are using drugs. What about being sexually active? Again, for kids that only have 0 to 10 of the assets, teens that only have 0 to 10, 41% of those are sexually active. Whereas for those who have 31 or more of the assets, it's only 5%. So you start playing this out and you go having problems in school, getting detentions, things like that. Well, same thing. If they only have 0 to 10 of the assets, 46% of those kids are having problems in school, compared to only 2% of those that have 31 or more of the assets. And then when you want to get to a positive behavior, like getting good grades, getting mostly A's, well, sadly, for those that have only 0 to 10 of the assets, only 3% of those kids are getting mostly A's, whereas over 51% of those that have 31 or more of the assets. So that essentially, what this discovery was so important is that puts you in a position as a parent where you're going, Well, I want my kid to have 31 or more of these assets because
Yes.
obviously, if they're in that, it's a much better statistical chance that they are going to avoid the at risk behaviors. And it's a greater likelihood that they will get good grades, the positive behaviors too. So what does this have to do with faith? Well, just hang in there because now I'm going to go all the way back. So, Search Institute, secular organization, Peter Benson directing, that's where they went with it. But the original guy, again, behind the scenes, that started this all was a man of faith, Mert Strumman. Mert took a look at it through a different set of lens. And he just said, these were presented as here are the 40 assets, right? There's no weighted order. Number one asset is not more important than number two, number three. It's the more of these, the better. Okay. What then Mert discovered and did additional research to find out was he thought there was one in that list of 40 that did have a direct link to many of the others, meaning that if you had this one, many others came with it. Even, to be honest, up to 30 more came with this one asset. And that one asset at the time was entitled, now it's maybe evolved since then, was entitled religious community. That if you had religious community as a part of your life as a teenager, that was one of the assets. But he didn't want to call it religious community but they had to in order to remain a secular organization doing the work that they would be doing with the grants that they were getting. What Mert wanted to call that one is he wanted to call it faith relationship. When Mert studied it, what he discovered is teenagers, let this sink in, that have a faith relationship. In other words, a faith that is real, not that just go to church occasionally, a faith that they own, a faith that they embrace, that they are in love with Jesus, that they have a true faith relationship. With a faith relationship comes about 30 of these other assets come with that, are attached to what a true faith relationship is. So now you could say, as a parent, I get the results, let's just say, and it says my teenager has 14 of the 40 assets, and I want them to have 31. Oh my goodness, I got to help her develop 17 more of those. That can seem overwhelming. Or I could work on one. Because if she has this one, what comes with this one are up to 30 of the others. Oh, that sounds a lot more enticing to me. What's that one? Oh, that one is entitled faith relationship. Wow, if I have a faith relationship, if my kid has a faith relationship, guess what? It's going to lead them away from at-risk behaviors. A faith relationship is going to lead them away from alcohol use. It's going to lead them away from drug use. It's going to lead them away from early sexual activity. It's going to lead them away from violence. It's going to lead them towards the healthy behaviors that we are wanting. That is a statistical reality that it's almost like, it should have said maybe in Deuteronomy that, if you have a faith, it will go well with you. Hello, this is one of those things that, so what I want to say to parents is obviously faith is important because it is eternal life is at stake. But faith also has a here and now reality too, that if they have a real faith, a true faith, it is going to influence how they live their life. And it's going to help statistically. Doesn't mean that if your kid has faith, no kid that has faith will ever do drugs. No kid will ever no, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying the statistics are in your favor. And I think we all want as many things in our favor. And so a real faith is going to help also lead your kids away from things they shouldn't be doing and towards behaviors that they should be doing. I hope that long way to get there. But to me,
Excellent.
I found that too. And that's why the Search Institute has a whole division, if you will, that's all about faith and help working with churches and to help them become kind of asset building churches that through our programs, we can help kids have faith so that it develops these assets. So it's kind of cool to see.
Well, so let me be sure that I'm clear in this, Mark. You're saying that the research is saying that the faith relationship is very beneficial in the life of a child, and it affects so many other areas of their life, in positive ways, and it keeps them away from at-risk behaviors. If we talk about the negative side, so if a parent is concerned about their child, then the faith relationship should be the highest or one of the highest on that list in terms of their concern. And like you say, it's as if God knew that in Deuteronomy when he said it might go well with you. So,
Yeah, and I want to take it just so we're, again, I hope we're being clear here, but I want to take it one step a little more practical. A faith relationship means that you have a loving relationship with God and you love what God is about. You love who God is. You love his word. You love what his word says because you're in a relationship, right? A
mhm.
relationship it's a two-way street. It's love. There's true love that is there. It's a desire to want to do what his word says because you know that he loves you and everything he has written in here is for you and for your best interest. It is so that it will go well with you. Doesn't mean it will be easy. He's going to see you through that, but it's here and you actually love this. Therefore, if you are really in a faith relationship, you will love to do what this tells you to do regarding drugs, what this
Mhm.
tells you to do regarding alcohol use, what this tells you to do regarding violence, regarding, does that make sense? Regarding being disciplined and how we approach education. If, and that's why, man, oh life. And again, it goes back to, do our kids see that we're in love with this? That this is influencing us as parents as to how we make decisions regarding drinking, regarding whatever that we do. This, it is one of those things that we have to examine. Do our kids see that we're truly love this and that we're truly obedient to this because we want to be, not because we have to be? And then when they get to that place, it truly impacts the decisions that they make. And how many of us look back at life and say, man, I wish I would have been more in love with this as a teenager because it certainly would have helped me make some better decisions. When I realized that my faith was not that strong back then, and as a result, I made some really poor choices. Well, then you go, okay, so how do we help our kids have a stronger faith now as teenagers? And that's, to me, start them young and talk to them about what you did wrong and explain that to them. Be honest, be transparent with them, and let's help lead them to have a true faith. That's why I love what Mert was talking about. That's why I want to call it faith relationship. When you have that is going to impact many of these other assets, which is also comes with that, or many of these other things, which is going to help inform how kids make decisions in their lives.
I love how you're saying that it's faith relationship, Mark. It's not just that you got to have faith, sort of like the George Michael, you got to have faith song and that sort of thing. It's not having faith in terms of positive thinking and that sort of thing. It's faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. And that's a relationship, and that you're at peace with God because you know that God loves you and he sent his son for you and he wants to be in this relationship with you. So that's the kind of faith that we're talking about here, Mark. But if we put together that faith is such a critical part of helping our kids grow and to be healthy, and we put that together, that it's such an important thing, and that parents are the primary influence, like we said last time, then I hope that it's going well at home, of course. Do we have any information about how things are going in homes in this regard?
Well, and that is an ongoing work that when you and I first started in this, Brian, and when we first began this, there were, because with that same study, that significant religious influence is one that we talked about in the last session. We kind of went through how mom's most influential, dad's second, third, pastor, fourth, grandparent, that they're the primary influences. At that point, they started to ask questions too regarding, but how many of you have ever talked to your dad about faith? How many of you ever talked to your mom about faith? And these were good church-going kids that were active in their youth programs. And when those results, and we put those in the book, when you see those, you will be a little bit, I don't know of any group that we have shared that with where they don't walk away a little bit stunned and a little bit alarmed, especially when you factor in that these were active church going kids that were surveyed. And then when they were asked, so just a simple thing of, have you experienced prayer in the home? Have you experienced Bible reading in the home? What about having faith conversations in the home? And so, And that data that was at the time that when we wrote this book, that was very riveting, very compelling. I mean, it was kind of very, very much game changing for a lot of people to look at. I'd love to say, because this book, believe it or not, is getting to be close to almost 15 years old now. You sit there and go, well, I'm sure things are different now. Well, it's actually gotten worse. As best as we can tell, it certainly hasn't gotten better. We just got done, Brian, we've just got done doing what we did was a whole survey that I mean, you're the real champion of this thing called Faith at Home Revealed, where we thought no one has really done a deep dive looking into what is happening in the homes of churchgoers today and American churchgoers. And that, as you know, we're over 6,000 people now that we have surveyed from across 12 different denominations to take a look at where's prayer life like in the home, Bible reading in the home, faith talk, all these things that Deuteronomy 6 said need to be happening in the home. And so I just want to encourage you, if you want to find that out for yourself, get Faith at Home Revealed. That was the book that has all that data and all that information, and it shows you what singles are doing in the home, what couples are doing, what they're doing personally, what they're doing as a couple, what they're doing with their children, what they're doing with their teenagers or not doing with them in those areas of prayer in the home, Bible reading in the home, faith talk in the home, worship in the home, all these different areas. So, and all that to say that we definitely have work there. In all those areas. Probably the area that's the best is prayer in the home. But after that, boy, when it comes to faith talk in the home or worship in the home or a lot of these, ufta, we definitely have some work to do and the greatest work is we may be doing it personally in our homes is what our study found is a lot of churchgoers are at least praying personally, reading the Bible personally in their home and women more so than men. But boy, then it drops. They then do it second best with their children, and they do it some with their children, but depends on the area, though. There's a lot of those areas they're not doing with their kids. But then there's a significant drop when the children become teenagers. It's almost like we're like, okay, now we're not going to do it anymore because now they're teenagers. So it's just, and so there's a significant drop in faith talk in the home with teens, prayer with teens, Bible reading with teens. It really drops significantly. And when you think about it, that's kind of sad, right? Because that's at a time when they need it the most. As they're facing all these major life decisions at this point. And then the area, though, that was the hardest for us to see in Faith at Home Revealed was couples. Oh my goodness, there's hardly anything happening as far as the spiritual life in the home as couples doing it together. And so then imagine kids are being raised in an environment where they've never seen their mom and dad pray together or read the Bible together. And then very little. So it's no wonder that later in life, these kids walk away from the faith saying it was just hypocritical. And so we definitely have some serious work to do. So the book, Faith Begins at Home, has some results in it that's, starting to get around 15 years old now or more. But if you want to see some fresh data, get Faith at Home Revealed, and that will really show you what's happening current day situations.
You said hoofda. Is that like Minnesotan for wow? Hoofda?
I just saw that. I've started to pick that up because, I lived in California for 11 years and now I came back to Minnesota. And so now my O's are getting louder, Minnesota. And I've just started. Ufta's coming back, man. There's a revival going on with the word ufta. You just wait. It's going to spread across the country. I'm sure of it.
Yeah, and how do you spell that, Mark? I'm sure it'll be the title of one of your next books on. Anyway, well, we want to get back down to some real brass tacks in terms of some practical things in the book. And you mentioned, it is some older statistics, but a couple of these things really jumped out at me. The number of ones who have a regular dialogue with their mom about faith life issues, 12%. Number of teens or percentage that have a regular dialogue with their father on faith life issues, 5%. We could make such a big impact potentially if we can just find a way to talk with our kids about faith. You might be the dad that doesn't talk a lot. You didn't go to Bible school, and you're not a pastor, and you feel somewhat inadequate. But if faith talk is so important, and that opportunity with your kids and your influence, then the best thing you could do is just find some way of initiating some conversation with your kids. So, Mark, let's talk about that. How do you do that? And you give this acronym in your book called TRAIN to help us on that journey. So, if you could just walk us through what does that mean?
Yeah, and realize, why are we focusing on faith talk? The importance of that, because again, that's what Deuteronomy 6 direct us. It's talk about these things. Impress the ways of God on your children by talking about it with them. When you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up, that talking about it. I mean, again, if you're in a relationship with someone, you talk about it. I mean, whatever you're in love with, you talk about. I mean, I love golf. And so guess what? When I get down the round of golf, guess what I'm talking about? I'm talking about my round of golf. It drives my wife nuts. She just doesn't care. But that's, if it was a good round. Or I got my thing of my Chicago Cubs here. I'm a Cubs fan, and they're in the playoffs right now. So I talk about the Cubs because, that's how are they doing and so forth. When you're in love with something, you talk about it. But yet for some reason, it's like we can't talk about God. We a lot of people, and so just know this, we get it. We have heard this from so many parents that they're like, I just don't know how. How do you talk about God and his ways? And of course, what every parent is biggest fear is, well, if I try to do that, what if my kid asks me a question and I don't know how to answer? And that's, yep, welcome to parenting. That's going to happen. And we're always going to say, I don't know. That sounds like one. But so what we wanted to do in this chapter is wanted to really help parents, train them in how to do faith talk. And that's, I had a mentor. One of my mentors was a guy by the name of Raleigh Martinson. And I'll never forget this quote. When I heard him say it, I wrote it down, and I've used it in a lot of my parenting conferences. But he says, what we ought to do, because this was not just a quote, this was like a picture that he was painting. What we ought to do is let the kids drop their parents off at church. Train the parents, which I love that, by the way. Could you imagine kids pulling up and say, Mom, Dad, you get out. I'm going to go to Starbucks. Train the parents, and then send the parents back into their mission field, which is their home, to grow Christians. I just thought that was such a great image, right? And so let's talk about, what do we need to train parents to do? And I think that's where we'd start. Let's train you in how to do faith talk. And that train can be such an easy acronym, but each one has some nuggets of truth in it, which is the T stands for time, which what I have discovered in working with parents and so forth is there's always, we never have enough time in the day, and we're always crunched for time, and we're trying to, and then our biggest fear is, oh man, how much more time is this going to, in order for me to do this, if this is something I need to do, how much more time is this going to take? What is this going to require? And we get all like, that's, and so now you want me to do faith talk with my kids? Is that like an hour? Is that where we're supposed to all like get the kids all together, sit at the kitchen table, all behaving, candle burning, Bible open, magical Jesus kumbaya moment for where everyone behaves, and we got to create this perfect devotional so we got to do devotions, family devotions. That's it. We got to have time to do that, and we got to do it every day. And instantly parents hear that and they get overwhelmed, and they think, have you ever seen my kids? They're never going to sit at a table behaving together, and that's just not going to work. And they get all kind of worked up, and we pretty much rule it out before we ever give it an opportunity. So the first thing I want to say to you is, understand that when it comes to faith talk, the T is not about making a time for faith talk, where for 1 hour every day from 6 to 7, we will have faith talk. That's not it. It's about seizing the times that God provides for you every day to have faith talk. And that my dad always called it seize teachable moments. My dad was a Bible camp director, and he never taught the staff how to do a 1 hour Bible study with the kids, because he did not like the approach at camp where you just play all day and then you have 1 hour Bible study, then go back to playing all day, and you never incorporate. No, he wanted God being talked about anytime and all the time. So if you're on a hike with the kids, if you're playing soccer, if you see something, there's a rainbow, my dad would stop and say, hey, by the way, what's that rainbow? Look at that. And everyone would be looking at the rainbow. Oh, that's cool. Yeah, what's that supposed to remind us of again? I think that has something to do with the flood. Okay, what was it about the flood? And what's the rainbow supposed to remind us of? Well, that God will never do that again. And Does God keep his promises, do you think? Next thing you know, we were talking about the promises of God, and Dad was seizing a moment to have faith talk. He wasn't waiting for Sunday at 6 o'clock with the candle burning and the Bible open for us to have a faith talk. And so the first thing I think with what we see what I see in Deuteronomy 6 is that faith is to be talked about anytime. When is the right time for faith talk? Anytime, all the time. Bedtime, morning time, car time. I mean, anytime you're in the home, boom, home is primary place. So T stands for anytime. When's the right time for faith talk? Let's just talk about God anytime and all the time. The R stands represents
so helpful,
repetition. One of the things that helps with faith talk, and anyone that maybe grew up Lutheran or grew up Catholic or grew up, knows that they grew up with some rituals that were repeated. And those things, and repetition is not a bad thing. God gave us things like the Lord's Prayer so that we would repeat that. And it was meant to be a part of our rhythm because repetition drives things deep. And you retain it because, so don't be afraid to use repetition. But here's the key. Repetition has to be driven from relationship. If it's repetition just for the sake of doing it as repetition, then it just becomes ritual and it has no meaning. But when repetition is being done out of relationship, it's something you want to do and it has its meaning. You understand why you are doing it. So make sure that when you use repetition, you are using it in a way that you're explaining why you are doing it. And I just today went over and saw one of our seniors from our church who is in a memory care facility. And it's always hard because I knew her husband passed away about 2 years ago. She's fantastic. I know them both, been to their house many, many times. It's been hard to watch this terrible dementia kind of just slowly kind of eat away at her memory. And there are times, today was one of those where her memory was not good today. And she was struggling and it's kind of asking the same questions over and over. And I could see that it was unsettling her. But then at the very end, something that I learned from a mentor was I just kind of sat right next to her, grabbed her hands and said, and then I just started saying the Lord's Prayer, Our Father who art in heaven. And as I started saying that, she instantly just started, joined in right with me. And it was one of those just sweet moments that she knew every bit of that prayer because repetition has driven it deep into her heart and to her soul. That relationship she has, that love for the Lord is there, and it comes out in moments like that. And we want our kids to have a faith that is deep. So repetition, make sure it's okay to use repetition in faith talk. A stands for acceptance. And what I mean in this is you have to accept that every kid is different. Dads, you're going to do it differently than moms. Moms, don't try to make a dad do it the way you do it. It won't work for them. And probably what works for your son is not going to work for your daughter. You're going to have to accept that faith talk needs to be done differently. We need to accept that there's different ways and enjoy that, embrace that rather than resisting it. And so it's okay to do it differently and find different ways and embrace that. And there are going to be seasons. We have to accept this. There were times where my daughter was closer to me. And so then I was the one that was doing more of the prayer with her. And like even my daughter, she's one of those, my wife grew up Catholic, so ritual. So every night when my daughter would get ready for bed, my wife did the ritual of blessing her every night, where she'd say, like, I'm ready to go to bed now. And then she'd go over to Maria and Maria would say, all right, may the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look upon you with favor and give you peace. We love you. Amen. Every night. That's what my wife did with her. Well, I grew up at a Bible camp where we didn't do anything the same ever. So I couldn't ever do it in a ritual way. So then Malin, after she got done getting her blessing from Maria, then she'd come over to me and say, okay, Dad, let's pray. And then we always would talk a little bit. And then we just have, do you want to pray today? Do I want to pray? And each time we just prayed differently. And we had my way was different than my wife's way. Neither one's right or wrong. We accepted that. And our daughter accepted that in us and what worked. And so when you have multiple kids, accept that it's going to be different. The I stands for intentionality. Faith Talk has to be intentional. We are going to have to create moments for it to happen. And what I love is Deuteronomy 6, one of the hidden nuggets, it gives us those moments for Faith Talk. Talk about these things when you sit at home. When's one of the few times we're actually sitting together at home? It's usually mealtime. Could be just you and your daughter. Could be just two of you together. Could be you and a couple. But you take advantage of mealtime, a good time to talk about, hey, what's God doing in your life? Hey, what do you need prayer for? Here's what I need prayer for. Make sure it's not just about peppering them with questions, but tell them what God's doing in your life. Faith talk, mealtime, talk about these things when you walk along the road. That's car time. Boy, driving your kids to and from activities, and great opportunity for faith talk. Shut off the radio, make them put the phones down, and just have a little bit of faith talk, a little discussion as you're doing that. Time for prayer before they get out of the minivan and go to school. Take advantage of car time. Take advantage of bedtime and morning time. Those are the other times that Deuteronomy 6 talks about. Perfect opportunities. But again, except if you do not have a morning, like I was not a morning child. I don't like mornings. Please don't. If you tried to do faith talk with me in the morning, it would not go well with you. My other sister, she was a morning person. So my mom would do it with Julie in the morning, but she knew to do faith talk more with me in the evening because I was a night owl and I just wanted to stay up longer. Accept that, take advantage of those times, but be intentional in making faith talk happen. And then the N stands for never ending. I don't care. I mean, how old your kids get, how old you get, we never stop talking about our God. We never stop talking about our faith. We never stop talking about how God is changing us. And what I love today is we hear a sermon we like, we can send that to our kids. We can send them links of all sorts of things that we are reading and things that podcasts that we are listening to and say, kiddo, listen to this, check this out. And then they do that with us too. Make faith talk and faith, how we're growing in our faith, and that make that something that's just never ending, that we're excited about, that we enjoy sharing, that we enjoy wrestling through. And here's another one I heard, and make sure it's never ending. So there you go, Brian. That's kind of what the acronym stands for, to help us get better at Faith Talk.
Right. So take the train to Faith Talk. If you've been listening along, we have been using the acrostic of TRAIN, TRAIN, to help us understand very practically how we can begin to impress these things upon our kids. Now, the acrostic TRAIN stands for the T being time, the importance of spending time with our kids, and some of those times that Mark mentioned are, bedtimes and mealtime and vacation time and drive time. The R stands for repetition and how important it is to keep going over these things with our kids. The A for acceptance, the I for intentionality, and the N for never ending. And isn't actually that a fitting description of our role as parents? It's never ending, because they keep coming around. Even if they grow older and move away from home, quite often they come back and you continue to have significant influence on them. And they end up oftentimes getting married, having kids of their own, and so the cycle begins all over again. And welcome to grandparenting. Well, next time we are going to talk about grandparenting in our extended family makeover discussion. Please join us during that time. Mark Holman is going to share with us a little bit about his own mom and her influence into their home and on his daughter and so on. So you won't want to miss that. Now, don't forget the train. This might be a good opportunity to do something tangible in terms of having a discussion with your kids about faith.